from Rixie. This is Debuff, and I'm your host, Steve Skeels. Today I'll be talking about Aria Chronicle, Paper Mario the Origami King, and Ghost of Tsushima. Aria Chronicle is another game I knew nothing about until it popped up on Steam. And even if you search it now, there's hardly any information on it online, so I wanted to give my impressions. The game released on July 12th and currently has no Metacritic score, but it's reviewing pretty well on Steam. I saw some of the Steam reviews refer to it as an anime Darkest Dungeon, and since I love Darkest Dungeon, it was an instant buy for me. I've only had the chance to play for a handful of hours since I picked it up, but it's definitely a JRPG with some Darkest Dungeon inspiration. There are familiar mechanics, but the details of how it works is pretty different from Darkest Dungeon itself. I'm going to butcher some of these names because there's no English dub for it, but you start the game following Aria, the princess of the Tamagaria Kingdom, on a pilgrimage with her aide Tilla and secretary Garum. Upon making their way to the village of Latibra, they uncover a missing mare and a mysterious cult. They hire adventurers to aid in their quest to figure out what's going on, and hopefully continue on with Aria's pilgrimage. You start your party with Aria, who you get to choose one of 13 classes for, and Tilla, who is a paladin. You can then recruit many characters that will fall into one of those 13 classes. The unique characters can't be permanently killed, but the generic ones will go into a graveyard where they can be revived, but if you have more than 10 there, they will start to disappear as more characters die. With parties of 5, this means you'll need to have 2 full party wipes of generic characters before you even start losing characters permanently, so it seems pretty forgiving. The town hub is where you'll recruit these characters, as well as get quests, and craft or buy items. The town facilities can also be upgraded as you progress, so even if you start losing characters, you'll never really be back at square one. Quests will take you to randomly generated maps, where you explore to complete your goal. Moving and interacting with the environment consumes stamina, and losing too much stamina will affect your party's mental state, which, in turn, affects how they play. The map is mostly blank when you start, so you don't really know exactly where to go or how much is left to explore. But I didn't find this to be much of an issue if you manage your stamina well. Combat is turn-based, and while it does have some features like position requirements for the skills, I think it's pretty standard JRPG fare. The classes play about how you'd expect, and they're all distinct. There's definitely some overlap, but I didn't feel like any of the classes were interchangeable. Even at early levels, the skills they get are unique. And as the characters level up, stats increase and skills are automatically unlocked. So there isn't much to building the characters themselves, but they do gain talents, which are passive skills that you can only equip few of. So you'll have to pick and choose what you like. They will also gain traits, which are very similar to quirks from Darkest Dungeon. They're randomly obtained, and they're just more passive skills that generally have positive and negative attributes, like lowering accuracy but giving you higher crit damage. The talents combined with the traits are how you're going to be able to make 2 characters feel very distinct, even within the same class. One cleric may be loaded with status and damage bonuses, while lowering their healing capability. You might have a second cleric that forgoes doing any damage altogether and focuses on healing and reducing their aggro to stay out of the fray and continue keeping the party topped off. I think it works well enough, but since the traits are random, just like Darkest Dungeon, there isn't a lot of depth for the player to get into. It's more about finding the right party combination and what skills you're going to want to use. I think it's a pretty engaging combat loop altogether, and really just the whole loop of going into the dungeons is pretty fun on its own. Though this is definitely the kind of game I already enjoy. It has roguelite elements with RNG and the potential for permadeath, but it doesn't feel quite as punishing of many other games of its kind. Normal mode feels pretty balanced too. Some encounters might annihilate you if you're not careful, but it doesn't feel impossible as long as you take on quests of your level. Hard mode is, of course, harder, but it just seems to require more strategy. And if you're worried about the difficulty, there is an easy mode that I imagine should be manageable. I recommend checking out some videos, but if you're interested at all, it seems like a great game for the price tag. After a surprise announcement only a few months ago, Paper Mario the Origami King is here. Released on July 17th, the game currently has an 81 on Metacritic and has been called pretty good by most. I think the general consensus I've gotten is that it has some missteps, but it's still a fun game. It's centered around the Origami King folding the world into how he likes it, and Mario must team up with the King's sister and Bowser's squad to stop his plans. I've said it before, but like most Mario games, the story seems just sufficient, and that's probably not why you're here. Though I'm sure with the Paper Mario games, there's going to be many individual moments where you'll find the most enjoyment. While many were hoping for a return to form, this seems a bit like a half step that draws from the early games in the series without quite getting back to its roots. It isn't an RPG exactly, and not just because there are no experience points. Mario does still have progression with upgradable health and abilities, but overall, the battle system is more of a puzzle than a turn-based combat structure. The standard battles take place on a circular arena, and you must turn and push pieces of the arena to line up or group up enemies. You will then either jump on them or hit them with the hammer. Bosses switch this up a bit by placing Mario on the outside of the arena, where you will still move the pieces around, but now just to make a path to the boss. The true combat system is really just in the puzzle of moving the board around, while the damage you do is somewhat arbitrary. Even the upgraded abilities, like better hammers, are mostly just a means to deal with tougher enemies later on, not necessarily to give you combat options. But hey, no one said it was going to be an RPG, and I think this is a pretty unique take on a turn-based combat system. It's just not going to be for everyone. The one thing I've seen many people saying is that the maps in this game are huge, much larger than previous titles in the series. The exploration itself, though, seems a bit basic, but pretty good overall still. You'll find toads scattered around the map, hidden in different locations, and as you explore, you can interact with the environment by using Mario's extendable arms or plugging holes with confetti. There are many puzzles around that range in how unique they are, but all in all, it's probably about what you'd expect from a Mario game. I think it looks pretty good overall, just as many people are saying. It seems decent, and I'm happy to see that they're taking a step in the right direction, but I don't know that I'll be picking this game up, at least not yet. I'm into the idea of the battle system, but I do think it could get a bit repetitive without any real sense of progression. And since I don't imagine the story is all that engaging, I don't know that it's going to hold my attention. Last up today is Ghost of Tsushima, and this is probably the other half of the reason I'm not picking up Paper Mario. Also released on July 17th, this game currently has an 85 on Metacritic, though I expect it'll go down a few points as more reviews come out. Developed by Sucker Punch, this PS4 exclusive is probably going to be the console's swan song, and it sounds like it does a good job at that. Many of the reviews I've seen have said pretty similar things. It's a great game, and it may seem a bit generic from the onset, and while it does draw from your typical open-world games like Assassin's Creed, it is far from another AC clone with a samurai skin. Personally, I think a lot of the misconception comes from the fact that they haven't shown a lot of this game, and I think a lot of people just don't know what it's all about. Myself included, even after watching some of the gameplay footage recently. The game has the player take control of Jin Sakai, and centers around the real-life Mongol invasion of Tsushima Island. Jin is an honorable samurai, but he quickly learns that he must do whatever means necessary to protect his homeland. To that end, he will act as the ghost and strike from the shadows when necessary, which basically puts him in the role of an assassin or ninja-like character as well. I think the combat seems pretty intricate, but it may come across as dull if you don't really get into the mechanics. As a samurai, you have multiple sword stances that work best on different enemy types. Additionally, you can have standoffs with enemies and wait for the opportunity to strike, just like the classic samurai movies. When done well, you'll take out enemies really quickly and allow you to work your way through multiple enemies before taking on the remainder. The stealth is supposedly where the combat falters, as many have said it doesn't give too many options and can have poor AI at times. And sadly, I'm not surprised. I feel like this happens a lot in games, especially when it has both stealth and standard combat, likely because they just didn't have a lot of time to focus on building up the stealth the same way a game that is exclusively stealth would. There are some mandatory missions where you must play stealthily as well, where you basically fail if you're seen, so you can't abandon it entirely. However, most people seemed to get past that and enjoyed it for what it is. The most exciting part about this game seems to be the world itself. Many are comparing it to a Breath of the Wild, the way that you naturally stumble into unique moments that feel very organic. A big part of this is likely the guiding wind. Instead of waypoints, the world naturally pushes you to your objectives with the wind and environment, pushing and flowing as you go around. And without big question marks on a map telling you that there's an objective, it feels like it's part of the world rather than a game mechanic where you just stumble into things and feel pretty natural to actually playing the game like something Jin might run across himself. The worst I've heard is that it plays on a lot of tropes of open world games that we've gotten sick of, like tedious collectibles and maybe some side missions and things that just feel a bit tedious as well, but that doesn't take away from the experience. At this point, I've come to expect a certain amount of that in any open world game, and as long as they're not just doing it to pad for time, then I think it's just fine. In the end, this seems like a solid exclusive to end the PS4's life on, and I'm excited to pick it up. Debuff is hosted by me, Steve Skeels, edited and mixed by Mason Carlton. Follow us on Instagram at DebuffPod. That's DebuffPod. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.